Okay, busy week continues. Still got a cold, but busy week continues of videos. This one that I'm about to talk you through now is basically part two of the one that I uploaded yesterday, where I was talking about the impact of the First World War and the British mandate in Palestine. So it's kind of part two of that, looking at what happens directly afterwards, and it's titled "Violence in Palestine and the Peel Commission," because that is basically what happens next. So, as you've seen already, the British mandate, that I was talking about in the previous video, was not popular, especially with the Arabs in Palestine, but with certain sections of the Jewish population too. I mentioned that they weren't particularly happy with the violence that they were receiving from the Arabs, and they actually complained to the British, and the Irgun was formed, and I've done all that in the previous video. So we've seen that there was an increase in tension between the Arabs and the Jews, mainly brought about because of the increased Jewish immigration in Palestine. And as I say, I'm going to kind of carry on talking about what happens as a result of that tension now. So the violence continued. The violence as a result of that tension continued in the 1930s. And it culminated in something called the Arab Strike in April 1936. So, as it says, on the tin, the Arabs went on strike, and they refused to call off that strike until their demands were met. And those demands were, as you can see here, an end to Jewish immigration into Palestine, an end to land sales, because obviously Arab land was being sold off to the Jews who were moving into Palestine, and they wanted an independent national government of their own. Basically, particularly that third point, they wanted the McMahon-Hussein agreement to be followed that I talked about before. As part of this strike, they refused to pay taxes, and they boycotted all trade with the British. So they were trying to hurt the British economically. And on top of this, they attacked roads, railways, oil pipes, and indeed British troops. So all those were attacked during this Arab strike. So it wasn't just a strike, it was very much a kind of violent incident. The reaction to this from the British was pretty strong. The British reacted very strongly to this, arresting Palestinian Arab leaders and flogging them. That means beating or whipping them. So flogging and beating the rebels, and searching villages for weapons. The strike, as you can see here, finally ended in October after 6 months. It started in April of 1936, and it ended in October of 1936 after 6 months, because the British had actually asked neighbouring Arab countries, namely Iraq, Saudi Arabia and Transjordan, the kings of each of those countries, the British government had kind of put pressure on them to appeal to the strikers, the Arab strikers, and call for calm, and that's exactly what happened. Another reason why the strike ended is that it was actually time for the orange harvest to be brought in, so it was actually quite a good time to end the strike, because that was obviously a key part of the Palestinian way of life economically. So all of this tension and violence, particularly with the Arab strike, but things that happened before then as well, led to the British government kind of wanting to get to the bottom of this. So they set up a commission or an investigation to look into the problem, to look into the issue, look at the causes of this tension, and to find a permanent solution to the issues in Palestine. It was known as the Peel Commission. Okay, it was led by a guy called William Peel, hence the Peel part of it. So the Peel Commission was looking into the issues, and in July 1937, Peel published his findings, published his commission, and he suggested in his findings that the only way to solve the problems in Palestine was to partition it, to divide it up, basically. Divide it up into two states, countries, one for the Arabs and one for the Jews. Simple as that. Well, I say simple, obviously it's not that simple on paper. Or rather, it is simple on paper, it's not that simple in real life. So that's what he suggested. Split Palestine into two separate states, one for the Jews, one for the Arabs, and that'll be that. So basically, well, I say that, it's a little bit more complicated than that. As it says here, a small part would remain under British control. I'll show you a map of it in a second. It was basically the area around Jerusalem. I'll show you this map now. So here is a map with Peel's kind of suggestions on it. So this area up here in the kind of peachy colour was designated as the Jewish state. This kind of darker pink colour down here would be designated to the Arabs, and this green section here in the middle would be under British control, and you can see Jerusalem is there. For obvious reasons, Jerusalem, it was said by Peel, should be under British control, because obviously Jerusalem was really important to both groups. So obviously giving it to one group would have caused a lot of problems with the other group. So therefore, in Peel's mind, the best thing to do was to kind of keep it in neutral hands, if you will. So that was the partition suggested by the Peel Commission. That was his suggestion, okay? So have an Arab state and a Jewish state, an independent area around Jerusalem. That will solve the problem. So what were the reactions to this? That was what he suggested. What were the reactions to the Peel Commission? Well, in a nutshell, the Jews reacted positively, largely, because in their eyes, it was better than nothing. Okay, it was certainly a step towards, or part of getting an independent state, as the Zionists had asked for. The Zionists had obviously said, look, we want an independent Jewish state. This gives them that. It's not all the land that they wanted, and obviously Jerusalem isn't part of it, but it's a step closer. So for the most part, Jews reacted positively to it. The Arabs, as you can see here, completely rejected the proposals. And they completely rejected the proposals for a few reasons. First of all, they thought it was unjust that they were having to give up any land at all. They said, why are we even having to give up an inch of this land? It's totally unjust. Also, a kind of bigger problem, really, was they said, well, there are 300,000 Arabs who live in this area that's going to allegedly become the Jewish state. So, for the 300,000 Arabs that live in this area, well, they're going to have to do one of two things. They're either going to have to move, or they're going to have to live in the Jewish state. And really, we don't want them to do either of those things. We don't want them to live there, or they don't want to live there, and they don't want to have to move. So, obviously, as I say, the Jews were largely warm to this proposal. Not completely, but largely, whereas the Arabs completely rejected it. In addition to that, I should say, that I'll put the map back up. In addition to that, 90% of the orange groves of Palestine were in this area. So again, the Arabs said, well, it's unfair that the Jews would get 90% of the orange groves. So as I said before, oranges, or the Jaffa orange in particular, was one of the big exports of Palestine. So again, the Arabs saw it as really, really unfair that the Jews would get 90% of those groves. So that's another reason why the Peel Commission was rejected by the Arabs. And that Arab anger, as a result of the Peel Commission, the anger towards that, culminated in the Arab Revolt of 1937 to 1939. So the Arab Revolt involved violent attacks against both Jews and the British forces in Palestine. Yeah, violence against both those groups. The revolt was put down by both the British and the Haganah. Now, the Haganah, if you remember, were basically the defence force of the Jewish agency. Their private army, in other words. So both the British, with the help of the Haganah, put down this revolt using very, very harsh tactics. And those tactics included curfews, thousands of Arabs were arrested, houses were destroyed, beatings and torture of suspected rebels, villages that were accused of helping or harbouring rebels were occupied and their inhabitants were kicked out. And most shockingly, Arab hostages were actually tied to the front of British lorries, basically as kind of human shields to protect against Arab snipers. Which obviously that was brutal, absolutely brutal. So the methods used by the British and the Haganah in this instance were really, really brutal to put the Arab revolt down. But as you can see there, as you've seen already, the Arab revolt lasted for around 2 years, 2 years of violence, and it was not a very good time at all in Palestine. And in fact, by the end of that revolt, here are some figures for you. By the end of that revolt, as you can see, 250 British troops have been killed, 300 Jews have been killed, and 5,000 Arabs have been killed, with a further 15,000 Arabs wounded. So, it's not been a great time for any of those groups, but in particular, the Arabs have really, really suffered during the Arab Revolt. Over 10,000 of the adult male population of Arabs had either been killed, wounded, imprisoned, or exiled. Over 10% of the adult male population. And most significantly, this is arguably the most significant, certainly in my opinion anyway, the most significant impact of the Arab Revolt, of how it was put down. All of the Arab leaders have been exiled, along with most of the Arab weapons being confiscated. So this left the Arabs, by the end of the Arab Revolt in 1939, this left them in a really weak position moving forward in 1939. So, and that'll become more significant with what we're about to look at, both in lesson and in a future video that I'm going to do, as you're going to see. So that takes us up to 1939. Which, as you are well aware, year 11 is the year that the Second World War starts. In the next Middle East, and we obviously looked at that in lesson, but in fact we're well beyond the Second World War now, but in the next video that I'm going to do, I'll talk about the effects of the Second World War on the issues in Palestine. Again, you guys know that already, but I'll do a video to kind of collate the knowledge and something that you can use for your revision on that. Okay, so as always, hope that's been useful. Way more videos to come, particularly Middle East videos. I'm on a bit of a roll with these, trying to get them all out to give you a helping hand as we're studying this. Again, as always, any comments below for suggested videos in the future, particularly for Middle East, but also for World War I, Germany, and civil rights as well. So, hope it's been useful. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.